Well, hello, my name is Charles Hipkin. I'm a plant biologist and I'm here representing the Leith Talbot Nature Partnership. But in my capacity today, I want to tell you about some special plants which occur in the Lost Peatlands landscape. So it's all part of the Lost Peatlands Project. And I'm going to talk to you about club mosses today. And before I really start talking to you about them in detail, I really ought to clear up the confusion in the name. Club mosses are not really mosses at all. They're really allied to ferns. They're called fern allies. Their technical name is lycophytes. And they're a very ancient group of plants which were once really common in the steamy carboniferous rainforests 400 million years ago plus. Okay, so there are 7 species of club moss in the British Isles. And I'm going to introduce you to 2 of them. There are actually 3 that grow in the Glamorgan conifer forests, but I'm going to show you 2 of them today. One of them is fir club moss and the other one is stag's horn club moss. Okay, so here's a fir club moss. It stands about, I guess, I don't know, 8 to 10 centimeters tall. This is really quite a big one. They don't live very long, so they don't grow huge at all. They certainly don't grow as big as the lycophytes did in the carboniferous rainforests. And it's sort of, you can see why they're called fir club mosses. They sort of resemble fir trees, although actually I think they more resemble little junipers than firs. Anyway, they grow from the base, sending up lots of shoots here. Then these shoots tend to branch near the tip. And if you notice, near the tip here, these pale objects, these are bulbils that occur in the axils of the leaf. And those bulbils get detached and they can be dispersed, and then they can give rise to a new club moss plant. As well as that, in the leaves below that, which are called sporophylls, you get a structure called a sporangium formed on each leaf. And inside each of these sporangia, you get spores produced. And those spores, when they are released and they're dispersed, will give rise to a totally separate and very different looking plant, a very small, microscopic almost plant, which grows in the soil, called a prothallus. And that prothallus produces male and female structures. And the male gametes, which are produced from the male structures, have to swim and find the egg in the female structures to fertilize it. And then that gives rise to an embryo, and that embryo will then give rise to a new club moss plant. So there's 2 means of reproduction. There's the bulbils, which is an asexual means of reproduction, and there's the spores, which is part of a sexual cycle. And probably the most important means of reproduction for club mosses, for fir club mosses, is the bulbils, which are contained up here, and they make sure that a large and healthy population is maintained in any one place. These club mosses love to grow in these upland areas with heather and bilberry, and really they are northern species which are really quite at home in Arctic alpine situations or growing on exposed cliffs, which you find in the upper parts of Leith Talbot and Rhondda Cynon Taf. So this is stag's horn club moss, and stag's horn club moss is quite different from fir club moss because it creeps along the ground. You can see these long creeping stems here, and the leaves are a sort of silvery green colour, so they have a really nice silvery tinge to them, and it can form extensive mats in old colonies. And stag's horn club moss produces cones in pairs, as you can see at the tops of these stems. These stems grow up from the stems that are creeping through the heather, and then you get 2 cones formed together like that. And inside these cones you get spores produced, and those spores then get dispersed, and then they give rise to a prothallus, just like with the fir club moss. But this prothallus actually grows underground, and it has to make close contact with a fungus in order to make any progress. And then when that prothallus grows underground, quite separately from this mother plant, it forms male and female structures again, and the male gametes have to find the female gametes in order to fertilize the egg, and then that embryo that is produced as a result of that will give rise to a new fir club moss plant. That takes quite a long time to happen, and it's quite a precarious procedure. And so reproductive success in stag's horn club moss is really relatively poor. So it relies quite a lot on the fact that it lives a long time and it's able to expand or increase the population size by these plants creeping through the heather and making bigger and bigger populations. All of these club mosses which grow in the Lost Peatlands landscape occur within the forestry plantations, and that has given them refuge from burning and grazing, which has resulted in the demise of them in many places outside of plantations. And in fact, both fir club moss and stag's horn club moss have decreased remarkably over the last several decades in South Wales. So these populations inside the Lost Peatland landscape are really very, very important. And foresters and conservationists are now working very closely together to come up with plans in order to protect these species from forest operations. So they're a really important part of our culture and a very important footprint in the sort of northern upland landscape that we have in South Wales.